Hey y'all. Today I'm interviewing Andy Pilgrim. Let's see if he answers the phone.
Hello.
Hey Andy, this is Doug Kenney.
Hello, Doug Kenney. Andy Pilgrim. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you? Are you ready to do this phone chat?
Yes, sir. Absolutely ready.
Alrighty, it means a lot to me to be chatting with you because you were one of my favorite road racers back in the early 2000s.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Appreciate your enthusiasm. It's always good to chat to anyone that likes racing, whether they compete or whether they're just fans or enthusiasts.
Yeah, and I got involved in the sport back in it was between 2005 to 9.
Got it.
Yeah, and what got me inspired was the Disney film Cars.
I think I remember reading that. I think you put that somewhere once, and I think I probably picked up on it reading it because I'm a huge cartoon fan. You may or may not have seen some of my helmets, but I love putting cartoon stuff on my helmets. I've always done that. So I didn't see that movie in all its entirety, but I'm well aware of it.
Yeah, and I kind of think out of all the sequels, I think the first one is the best.
I think always the early ones seem to be the best in these franchises. Yeah.
Yeah. Alrighty, so I have a list of questions, and there's 46 of them, I believe, and they're all about your career.
Goodness gracious. All right, we will try to answer them.
Alrighty, cool. That sounds good. So, first one is, where are you originally from?
Nottingham, England.
Ah, nice.
Robin Hood country, yeah.
Robin Hood. I love that legend. So what is living in the United Kingdom like compared to the United States?
For the most part, where I've lived in the United States, I would say much warmer. I don't like cold weather and love England, love growing up in England, but honestly, one of the main reasons I came here was opportunity. The opportunities have been amazing. And also being able to live in a part of America which is much warmer was also a big plus.
That's cool. I think both countries are pretty cool, but yeah.
Very much so. I'm very happy that I grew up there. I have a great appreciation of history from growing up there, and of course, a great education there. So very, very lucky.
Yeah, that's really cool. And the United Kingdom has always been a place I've wanted to visit for years.
Yeah. And I did become a U.S. citizen in 1998, just as an aside to that. So I'm actually a dual citizen. You don't give up your British passport, but I became a U.S. citizen in 1998, just in case that's of interest to you.
Yeah, that is an interest to me because that was the year I was born.
Ah, very good. Excellent.
So what made you get into motor racing?
Ever since I was a little kid, I had an interest in cars. I don't know why. When I was young, I was fascinated by cars, different colored cars. After I first started being able to talk, I would call out the names of cars according to my parents. There was no motor racing background in my family whatsoever. And it was just a bit bewildering to them, the car racing. My dad had an interest in watching some motorcycle racing at a racetrack near where we lived. But that was it. We didn't have the financial means ever even thought about anything like racing, other than being someone that might watch it or listen to it on watch on the television or something like that.
Oh.
I just had a natural interest in it. Don't know where it came from.
Yeah, and I had an interest in cars as well because my grandfather worked for Napa.
Oh yeah, there you go. That's an interest. Yep, for sure.
Yeah, and my grandfather, he went to the Indianapolis 500 when A.J. Foyt won his fourth.
Oh yeah, I mean, met A.J. a couple of times. Great gentleman.
Yeah, and who was your favorite race car driver growing up?
Growing up, I think it was Mike Hailwood was the guy that, because Mike Hailwood, I was more interested in motorcycles in a knowledge base. So motorcycles, Mike Hailwood, who became an F1 driver, he was a world champion motorcycle racer. So Mike Hailwood, and also Graham Hill and Jim Clark. Those were the guys going back there. Those were the car race guys, purely car race guys that I liked.
Yeah, and those are legends. No other way to put it.
Absolutely, especially Clark. I mean, they sort of think about Jim Clark, and they talk about Ayrton Senna and Jim Clark from their eras as being just naturally brilliant race car drivers. Yeah.
Yeah, and Clark finished at Indy second as a rookie, which is amazing.
Yes, he did. Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever been to the Indianapolis 500?
I went when I first came to the United States. I went the first year I ever came here. There was a gentleman, my first contract, I was a computer programmer. That's how I came to the United States, as a computer programmer. And a gentleman I worked at Pontiac, because I was a contractor at Pontiac Motor, and he invited me. He said, oh, a group of us are going to the Indy 500. And that was 1981.
Oh, that was the year Unser won over Andretti.
Yeah, okay. I remember Unser won it, and I was completely clueless at that time what I was looking at, but it was really impressive.
Yeah.
It was probably the first car race I'd ever been to.
Yeah. Now that you brought that up, I think I should add a question to my list very quick. What was your reaction to the controversial finish when Unser was disqualified briefly?
I don't have enough data on that, I'm afraid, Doug.
No problem.
To have a reaction, yeah, I'm not sure on that one.
Yeah, there was a whole controversy around it, and looking at it, it may be best to kind of, not get into the politics of it. Know what I mean?
There you go. I'm with you.
Yeah.
No politics always sounds good.
Yeah. So both drivers are pretty good. No other way to put it.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
legends for sure, actually, both of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and what made you get into sports car racing?
Well, it was sort of started with buying a second-hand car. I did a little bit of motorcycle racing after I became a computer programmer in England. So I took an old motorcycle second-hand, put some numbers on it, started racing it because I just wanted to try and race something. My parents were almost mortified by the thought of me doing it. But I did it, and after 2.5 years of doing that and winning quite a few races, I had a bit of sponsorship. But about 2.5 years into doing that, I got an offer to become a computer programmer by an American company in the U.S., and I came over to the U.S. Cars had always been the main point of I'd like to try to drive a race car. It was always economically unfeasible. But then I saved some money, and by 1984, I bought a second-hand, the IMSA Renault Cup Series race car, because it was street legal. I could drive it to the racetrack and race it, try not to crash it, obviously, so I could drive it home. And that's how I started. The car cost me $6,500. I actually borrowed some money from a bank manager, and got half the car, and that's how I started. And I drove it 1,400 miles to my first race, from Dallas to Riverside, California, to compete in my first pro race.
Ooh.
Actually slept in the car because it had to do it that way. There was no other way to do it. I didn't have a truck or a trailer, and maybe 20% of the guys didn't have a truck or a trailer and drove their cars to the racetrack. And I was one of those guys. I just came from a long way away.
Nice. That's really cool.
That's how I started. Yeah. It was a pretty rough way to start. But, when you're 28, 27 years old, you thought, you know what? You just want to do it, you do it. You don't think about whether it's difficult. You just do it, try. I just wanted to try. Yeah.
I commend you for that. And do you remember when Gurney won all those Riverside races?
No, I don't. To be honest, Doug, I don't.
Yeah, that was back in the 60s. And when
Okay, no, I wasn't here then, mate, so I wouldn't have known that, yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
I got here in 81, yeah.
Alrighty, and what is racing the Rolex 24 at Daytona like?
Oh, it's historical. There's a lot of history there. I'm a person who at least tries to appreciate history with motor racing or wherever I am. I'm always aware of, the history there, and I enjoy racing there because it's different. It's an oval, essentially the inside of an oval. It's a different location for us, and so I enjoy running around the banking because we don't get to do that a whole lot. In fact, I raced there last weekend in the Classic 24-hour in a Ferrari again, and ended up winning last week. So it's very fresh in my mind. I love Daytona. It means a great deal. I like it.
Yeah, and I hope to go to the 500 eventually. That'd be really cool.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Sadly, I was only there once, and that was the year that Dale passed away, unfortunately.
Yeah, and speaking of which, that was my next question. What was it like working with Dale Earnhardt Sr. at the 2001 Rolex at Daytona?
Well, the thing was that we first met 5 months previously. It's a little bit of an interesting, I don't know whether you've read this story or not. It's sort of been around a little bit in some of the newspapers on his 10th year anniversary. There were stories out there, but essentially, Petit Le Mans is one of our sort of big 4 road races, international majors, if you like. In 2000, I was running in Petit Le Mans with the Corvette program, and ended up making a pass on one of the Vipers to win that race very late in the race, and it became a pass on like RPM Tonight. It was sort of the pass of the week, where there was a show called RPM Tonight back then, and apparently Dale Earnhardt had seen that pass, and this was October in 2000, right? So I ended up getting a letter sent to my house. So we won the race. It was the first big win by the Corvette race team back then. It was the first major win by Corvette racing. Of course, they've won 100 races since then, but that was the first one, the first major. I'm at home answering emails, despite the fact, you might not even believe there were emails back then, but there were. And a lot of race fans were sending emails. There was a knock at the door on like the Tuesday morning after the race weekend, and it was FedEx. I opened it. It had this logo, said Dale Earnhardt Incorporated on this envelope, and I thought to myself, oh, that's weird. It must be some kind of catalog. I thought it was maybe a catalog or something. So I opened it, and there was a letter inside, and it said, Dear Andy, that was some pass you made on that Viper last weekend in that Petit Le Mans. That pass is exactly why I want you to be my teammate next year in the Rolex 24 Hours of Daytona. You obviously know how to trade paint. You've got to show me how to skin some snakes. And it said, sincerely, Dale Earnhardt. And I was like, seriously, it was a letter from Dale about that pass. And it was sort of announcing, I had no idea, that he was going to drive a Corvette the following February. And that was the first I heard about it. So I called my team manager, Gary Claudio, and said, Gary, I just got a letter from Dale Earnhardt. He was like, hi, we wondered why he was calling here yesterday looking for your address. So we gave it to him. And he said, yeah, but you can't say anything to anybody. I mean, I was all excited. And he says, you can't tell anybody about it because we're actually going to see him in 3 weeks to make the announcement that him and Junior are going to race with you at Daytona next year. And it was like, but he said you can't say anything for 3 weeks. I mean, it was like the hardest 3 weeks of my life not saying anything, to be quite honest. But that's how it started. So in that 5 months, there are so many stories that I have in that 5 months, building up to the race and going through the race. We became good friends, and just chit chat friends. I mean, I figured he had a lot of chit chat friends, but apparently he didn't, according to his sort of right hand guy, Steve Crisp. He told me almost, unfortunately, after he passed away, I learned a lot more about this. But we chatted a lot, had a lot of fun conversations, and traveled around a little bit to Pratt & Miller, to things like that, and raced together, obviously, and Junior was involved as well. And then I got my teammate Kelly Collins involved. So instead of being just the three of us, Kelly Collins was part of the team. But I just thoroughly enjoyed meeting Dale. He was so much more. I found out so much more than just a race car driver. He's a very kind person. He was a entrepreneurial person, obviously. Ooh. But he really enjoyed the idea of his the road racing, the car road racing, and I just thoroughly enjoyed meeting him and learning about his stuff. And the guy was an absolute legend. It was a privilege to spend some time with him and get to know him a little bit.
That's really cool, man. That's freaking awesome.
Yeah, thank you. It's a fun. It was I'd say a privilege to be part of it. To be honest, Doug.
That's awesome to hear. And so, yeah, after that, my next one is, what was your reaction when Earnhardt crashed at the end of Daytona?
Well, he had invited me and my girlfriend to come to the race, and my girlfriend of the time, and we were staying on the boat before the race, and he stayed in the motorhome with Teresa. Oh. So when I didn't see him, excuse me, before the race. So we ended up going to the track, and I sort of spoke to him on the radio a little bit before the race and stuff. But he sort of said, go to the suite, take care of that, do this, go there, whatever. And I saw him a little bit before, but during the race, you'll remember there was that huge red flag stuff.
Yeah, I've seen it.
So we were in the suites, the Chevy suites. He'd arranged me to have a ticket there, and I was watching the race from there. Then we wandered back after the big the wreck. Because he said, make sure you're back at the bus before the end of the race, because we'll get out of here and we'll go back to the boat. And so we wandered back all the way back to the bus. It was yellow, and we got back to the bus and got in the bus. And, Teresa was there. She was the only one in the bus, and we were just sitting chatting with Teresa. And I heard Teresa had a radio on a desk in front of her where she was, and we were just sitting, across sort of in the bus there. And the radio goes, "Does Andy have his ears on?" Now, I didn't imagine that Andy was me. And she said, "Oh, he's been asking for you." So I was like, "Oh, okay." And she handed me the radio. And I just basically say, "Hey, Dale, it's Andy." She's like, "Hey, you doing all right?" I said, "Yeah, you doing all right?" She said, "Yeah, it's all good." I said, "You having fun?" "Yeah, I'm having fun. Everything's good." And then we chatted a little bit. So he was still under yellow, of course, still under yellow flag. And then he said, he honestly said, "So you got any advice for me?" Can you imagine? 7-time Winston Cup guy. I mean, I just laughed. It was like, "No, Dale, I don't have any advice for you, man. You're doing great." I mean, to me, he had like a 15th place car that day, and he'd been up in the top 3 most of the day. It was amazing. Wow. I mean, just to see him work in the traffic, work in the draft, it was pretty masterful. I mean, even I could see that, not being an oval track guy. It just seemed to be pretty amazing piece of driving. But I said, no, man, you're doing great. I don't have any advice. You're doing great. And so then we didn't chat much more. And then a voice came over and said, "Green next time." And obviously, that was it. Like, okay, see ya. And that was it. And the race went green. And unfortunately, we know what happened within the next 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But at the very point that it happened, to be honest, Doug, we knew there was a crash, and I've been around enough racetracks, and when it goes quiet like that, it's never a good thing. Mm. And when he didn't get out of the car, I didn't suddenly think the worst. I didn't want to. That's just not my nature. But the longer it went, I had a horrible sinking feeling that this just wasn't going to be a good day. And then I heard from one of his crew that came by before the announcement that just was very emotional. I saw in his eyes. I didn't have to say anything, but he just said, Andy is gone. Andy is gone. And I was like, oh, you know, it was just, well, you know what happened after that.
Yeah, and how long was it after the crash before you got the news?
That's a great question, and I don't know, but I would say it had to be at least 2 hours.
Alrighty.
In my mind, but I can't remember exactly, to be honest, Doug.
Yeah, no problem.
It was a long time, and it was the longer it went, the more I was concerned, you know?
Yeah.
And poor Teresa, she was in the bus when the crash happened, the end of the race happened. Obviously, Michael had won, and they had won too. And she just likes Andy. I just don't know what to do. And I said, Teresa, you just got to go out there. And she wasn't sure which way to go. Like, Dale's just crashed, and I don't know. And then obviously people took care of her and took her where she needed to go. But she was like, she was just completely emotionally torn in 3 different directions. You know, it was just such a strange, I'm sure, just completely twilight moment for her. At that split second, it was like she's so happy that the team had done well, and then of course Dale had a big wreck, and it was like, oh my goodness, what do I do? But and she disappeared, and we were sitting in the bus. My girlfriend and I were sitting in the bus for quite a while before we were just wandered around outside just to see what was going on, and then it, you know, as I say, I saw one of the crew guys, and they said Andy is gone, and it was like, oh. And I wasn't surprised at that point because it had been so long, but the surprise isn't the point. The point is that, you know, you just lost someone who was a very new friend, but it was just surreal. It was just surreal. It just was surreal.
Yeah, that's very tough to go through. No other way to put it.
Yeah, sadly, it's, you know, I mean, Dale Earnhardt's one person that you just never imagined that would happen to. But in this business, started with motorcycle racing, you know, there's a lot of people that don't make it out of here. But it was just almost like Earnhardt was looked at as being Iron Man. You know, it was just, you know, it would almost be everyone else but Earnhardt, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was just so strange, I think. Psychologically, people just couldn't take it in, you know? And he was so loved by so many people. And of course, in a racing world, you know, many people probably didn't like him in a racing world, but nobody could deny the fact that he was just so, you had to respect him even if you didn't like him.
Yeah. And
you know, I mean, the biggest roar that 500, when they were introducing drivers, the biggest roar was for Earnhardt without any shadow of a doubt.
Ooh. Yeah.
The biggest cheer. You know, the biggest cheer was when Earnhardt's name was read out before the beginning of the race. It wasn't even a comparison with any other driver.
Yeah, I can imagine all that. And there are some drivers that I don't like either, but I still have respect for them.
Oh, you got to respect anyone that puts on a helmet. I mean, that's the way I look at it. You know?
Yeah, and that's a very good way to look at it.
Yeah.
So, how did you get your Busch Series ride with Dale Jr.'s team?
Funniest thing was I was on a golf course playing golf, and I got a phone call, and I answered the phone, and it was Dale Jr. And he was like, "Hey, Andy, how you doing?" I said, "Hey, Dale, I'm doing great. How you doing?" I said, "I'm just playing golf here." He said, like, it was like, so, I think he said, "So what are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm playing golf." And then it was like, he said, "Have you got a minute?" And I said, I'm playing golf, but, you know," he said, "Well, it's kind of important." And I said, "Oh, well, no, okay, then go ahead. What's going on?" And he said, "I just want to know if you wanted to have a ride in, I think it would be a Nationwide car at that point." He said, "I want to know if you want to drive a Nationwide car." And I was like, "Oh my God, are you kidding?" He said, "No, I just want to know." I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." Ooh. And he said, "All right." He said, "So call me back. So call me back when you start playing golf or whatever, but we'll talk." I said, "Oh yeah, no, I'm in. Like that was it. So that was it.
That's really cool. And how did it feel to represent the U.S. Navy in the Busch Series?
That's a great question, actually, because it meant an awful lot. And I met a lot of the Navy people. I mean, of course, it was just the 2 races, we almost pulled something off seriously in Canada, which was great in the first one. But it means an awful lot. I have a tremendous amount of respect. My father was in the Air Force in the Second World War,
Ooh.
and so I just I have respect for people that put themselves in harm's way. And that's just a lot. And so it meant an awful lot to meet some of those people, and it just meant an awful lot, especially for somebody who was not originally born here. It was very, very meaningful to me.
That's good to hear. And what was qualifying for the Montreal race like?
Well, I've never been to that track. So the fact that, I don't know where I qualified, to be quite honest. You probably know better than me. But it was so different. I mean, the brakes, the tires, the engines, the power of the engine. I mean, I did half a day test of VIR in the car, so I had a little bit of time in the car, which was great. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, it was the pressure wasn't really there in the sense that I knew I could at least qualify. And I can't remember where I qualified, but I did, I just wanted to get some time in the car, don't make any mistakes, and keep learning, keep going, keep learning the car, because a lot of good drivers in that series, of course.
That's really cool. And what was
a lot of road course guys, a ton of road course guys up there, ton.
Yeah, there was
Boris said, Max Pappas. I mean, loads of the Ron Fellows. I mean, tons of people. Along with the NASCAR regulars. So it was a great privilege. It was great. Andy Lally was there as well, I think. Yep. Yeah, it was great.
And Nick Janssen, if I remember right, as well.
Yeah, Nick was probably there as well. Yeah. Lots. I mean, lots. It was a whole. It was a who's who of racing, NASCAR and road racing, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've done research on that race for a number of years, and I learned that Harvick's win at the end of the race was kind of an upset. And the reason that was because everybody expected the road ringers to dominate with all the braking and all that.
Yeah, there was there was all kinds of controversy in the last part of the race with the last yellow, and I got turned around. Robbie Gordon was into it with somebody, and I mean, it was just, it was a typical Montreal mess on the restart. And unfortunately, I think I was leading on that last lap for about 200 yards before my tire had been flattened, and of course it went down. But I think I finished 15th, limping over the line with a flat tire. But I was in the top 3 there for the last restart. So, yeah.
Yeah, and what was your reaction when all hell broke loose when Harvick accidentally wrecked Pruitt?
You mean at the very end?
Yeah, that it was like the last caution, I believe, of the race. And you found
the end of the caution. Yeah, I think it's hard to know because it's behind you. But from what I was told, Harvick got into the back of me, put me sideways, and I got into Marcus Ambrose, I think. Something like that. It was something like that. So, but I don't know who hit what, where, and when. It was just a resultant for me was I think I got hit by Marcus Ambrose's car as he was getting hit by somebody else. It was one of those typical things going all over the place. And coming out of the middle of it was, I believe, Harvick ended up coming out best out of all that.
Yeah, because I believe Harvick went on to win the race.
Yes, I think so too. Yeah, yes, I'm pretty sure he did. Yes.
Yeah, and were you able to make it back to pit road to change the tire by the time the race ended?
No, I basically limped over the line with a completely flat rear tire. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet that was hard.
Yeah, 15th I think I was. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And what did Junior tell you after the disappointing end to your run?
He was absolutely ecstatic, and actually so was I, because the fact that I was up in the top 3 was really good. I was so happy with that. And then Junior, and I was apologizing to Junior because I got hit, and he was like, "No, man, are you kidding? That was amazing. I was on the edge of my chair. It was incredible." Because, we were right there in the top three, and they were trying to sort out the mess after the yellow, and after the crash that caused the yellow, and it ended up, I think I started third or whatever in the restart, something like that. But it was just crazy. It was just crazy. But Junior was happy. He was super happy. Yeah, it was because it was a fun race, and he saw his car running up front. I think that was a good thing, and it was my first time, so in a car like that, and so it was. I was happy, to be honest with you, Doug.
I'm glad to hear that, and it's kind of like how Boris said almost won Daytona a couple years ago in his own car.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, right.
So that shows that anyone can win a NASCAR race if things go right.
I think any race, you have to have some luck, to be honest, Doug.
Yeah, for sure. The definition of luck in motor racing is luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah, I've heard that. I have heard that, and I would never argue with that.
Yeah. So what was racing at Watkins Glen like the following week?
That was great. I enjoyed it. Again, it's just getting used to the cars, getting an idea on the speed of the cars, the setup of the cars. There's not a lot of time to do setup. You've got to be sort of ready to go. And so when you're not quite used to the car, it's an interesting proposition. But luckily, at Watkins Glen, I'm fairly familiar with the track. It was just a question of getting an idea how late you could brake, how well the brakes would work, and also how well the handling was. So it was just a question of coming together with that. But I enjoyed it because I like Watkins Glen. It's a fast racetrack, and I like fast racetracks. But the lack of familiarity with the car, the gearbox, the brakes, and everything else, when you're at the top level, these guys are so good. They're so used to the equipment. It's just a question of how fast could I get up to speed, and I did okay in Canada, and I think I ended up top 15 again in Montreal. Had a good race with at the end there. One of the NASCAR regulars had a really good run to the end, really good run. He was right behind me, and we were catching the people in front, but I couldn't. I can't remember who it was now, but I really thoroughly enjoyed running with those guys because. Very fair. I mean, very good side-by-side racing, hard racing, but I like that. That was good. It was really fun.
Yeah, and you know who else almost pulled off Montreal?
I think it was Denny Hamlin. That's what it was. I think it was Denny Hamlin. Yeah, Denny Hamlin.
Oh,
yeah.
I like Denny. I've always seen a good talent in him.
Oh, once they told me who it was, I mean, I also felt the same way. So I was pedaling as hard as I could. Just to stay ahead of him at that point.
Yeah, for sure. Do you consider Watkins Glen to be your best track between that and Montreal?
As far as NASCAR, I mean, obviously, as far as general racing terms, I've won races at Watkins Glen. I've only ever raced in Canada, Montreal, one time. So that, but there's plenty of other road courses like Elkhart Lake, Laguna Seca, Road America, the tracks that I'm much more familiar with, for sure.
Nice. And what was racing the 24 Hours of Le Mans like?
Phenomenal. First did it in 96 in a Porsche, then 97 again in a Porsche, and then went back there again in 2000 with the first time Corvette went there, and ended up going there with the Corvette guys 4 times. Yeah.
Ooh, cool.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Just such an incredible place, and a lot of the really good drivers that you can compete with, maybe at Daytona or Sears Point, when they get to Le Mans and you've never been there before, you have a really, really steep learning curve and very few laps to get up to speed. So it's one of those places where you've got to learn up fast. The speeds are so high for so long. It gives you a strange, it sort of sets up a strange reality there that you don't find anywhere else. Because at Daytona, sure, you're doing a lot of speed for a long time, but it's a wide racetrack and friendly place to go fast. But at Le Mans, it's a 2-lane road with, you know, three feet of grass and Armco barriers at the side. And it's a whole different deal. Just the impression of speed at 200 miles an hour at Le Mans, it feels like probably Daytona at 300 miles an hour, because Daytona is so wide. And at Le Mans, you just got to be really threading the needle down the road. And when you've got a car passing you at certain places, you've got to be really careful, because you can get a wind blast from a prototype in a GT car, and if you're sort of driving close to the white line at the edge of the track, it can actually blow you off the track. Ooh. You know, you have to be very careful. So Le Mans is a place that has its own different psychology. At Le Mans is a big deal. Patience is a big deal in the Rolex 24, and physical preparedness is one, like for Sebring. You know, all these endurance races have different requirements, in my mind anyway.
That's pretty cool. And is it held in France?
Yes, correct. It's about an hour and a half fast train ride from Paris to Le Mans. You go east from Paris, yes.
All righty. What was it like making your Cup Series debut in the 46 car in 2011?
Absolutely amazing opportunity. Never expected it. Always been on my bucket list that I could possibly have a chance to drive in a full, proper Cup race, if you like. And I got a phone call, and the team were asking, you know, if I might be interested in trying to qualify the car in, because we had more, as was normal back then at Sears Point, you had more people trying to qualify than could get in the race. I don't know if it's still that way, but anyway, back then you had a lot of cars. It wasn't just a question of show up and qualify. You had to qualify in. And I knew there was going to be tremendous pressure on me. They thought they were going to have a chance to do a half-day test to let me sit in the car. I went up to Michigan, where they were based, the Whitney Motorsports guys. But I sat in the car, but they said they weren't going to get the engine early enough to do any testing. So we weren't able to go test. So I sat in the car for the first time. We had an hour and a half practice session, and then it was straight into qualifying. But unfortunately, during the hour and a half practice session, the car's axle broke. So I only got like 5 or 6 laps in the car. I'd never sat in it before, so I don't know, 800 and something horsepower. You know, it just was, I'd never driven a car a car like that on that track. It was Sears Point. I knew the track well enough. The NASCAR parts pretty similar, so I had a reasonable familiarity with the track, except the NASCAR layout. I hadn't run that part of it. And I knew I was going to be under the gun. And I spoke to Jan Magnussen after this practice and said, I'm going straight into qualifying. And I think I spoke to Ron Fellows as well, just to try and get an idea, because both of them had qualified. They weren't at the track. They were on the phone. And I was basically, Jan was great. Jan, Ron was great too, but Jan was funny great. Jan made me laugh. He's just like, he said, Andy, those things are crazy. He said they have no brakes. They have too much horsepower. The tires can't take the horsepower. He said, whatever you do, he said, when you go out of the pits, warm up the tire, spin the tire, do whatever you have to do, because you come out of turn 8, you go down to turn 11, and you just run. That's all you got. You got nothing else. And so it's like you don't have time to do a lap to warm up to start the lap. You just have a quarter mile almost to just start the lap. This was something I'd never done before. So essentially, I just tried my best. And he said, whatever you do, don't let the car understeer going up into turn 1, because if you warm the tires up in the rear, the fronts are going to be stone cold. So I came out of the hairpin. I got pretty good grip. So I went flying around towards turn 1, and I'm going like, I just kept the power on just a tiny bit too long. And sure enough, I tried to turn into 1, and the car barely turned. And so I was like, just what he told me not to do. I pushed. Now, apparently, I was 7/10 off the bubble, I forget. I think Tony Ave was on the bubble, so I was the next one to last one to qualify. I think because I'd done no practice times, and Ave was in the race, and I had to knock him out essentially to get in the race, and he was the one on the bubble. And I was, I think, 0.6 behind his time as I went up towards turn 4.
Ooh.
And I didn't know that in the car, but I knew I'd lost time in 1. So I just said to myself, keep it clean, keep it clean. And I knew I was fast from turn 7, what I call turn 7, all the way back down to turn 11. I'm always good. Any fast corners in my career, I've always been quick. And I'm very comfortable sliding cars at high speeds. It's just what I'm comfortable with. And the car actually handled very well through there. And I made it as quick as I could. I just said, don't screw up the braking into 11. Don't try and grab too much. I got it right on the edge of locking up the rear tire, turned it in, got out of the corner fairly well, and then went across the line. And I went into Parc Fermé afterwards, came off the track and went up there. And then I just got a radio message from the guys basically saying, yeah, you made the show, son. You made the show, son. I was like, okay, great. So I guess I knocked poor old Tony out of the race, and we made it in there. So I got in by the skin of my teeth. But the team were very happy. That was my job to get in the race, and we got in the race. It was very, very close.
What did Tony say afterwards?
Tony, I never spoke to Tony because I don't know Tony very well, to be honest. I don't know Tony. I mean, I'm sure, I can't imagine he wasn't disappointed, that's for sure. Because it's a big deal. I'm sure his car was all painted up nice. I'm sure he had a big sponsor and all the rest of it. I mean, he's a very good driver. He's done, 25 years of Trans Am stuff and everything else. But I didn't actually speak to him. Yeah.
All righty. Yeah, that's part of racing. The qualifying.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, what is racing in Trans Am like? If you've ever done it?
Never done it. Never done it, actually, Doug.
Alrighty then. Have you ever raced in IMSA or?
Yeah, IMSA Sports Car Racing was where we had the Corvette running. So IMSA races for sure. I've won a lot of IMSA races. Part of the Daytona 24-hour, the 12 hours of Sebring, which I've won, and that Petit Le Mans, which I was mentioning. That's all around IMSA Sports Car Racing. Yeah.
Cool. Have you ever driven in the Grand Am NASCAR Sports Car Series?
Yes, that was going back. That was part of it. So there was Grand Am, there's the Grand Am Series, there was the IMSA Series, all of the above. Yeah, I've done all of those between the mid-1990s and all the way up to today, essentially. Yeah, it just kept being renamed, but essentially it was IMSA, then it was this, then it was that, then it was the other. Cuba kept buying the series and selling the series, and yeah, so I did all that stuff. So I've won races in all those sections of the sport. Yes. Nice.
Have you ever raced at Road America?
Many times. I've won. Yes, many times. I've won different races there. There's a big IMSA endurance race there. Kelly Cohen's and I won in the Corvette there. I also won in the international. There was a Corvette GT race there with IMSA a few years before that I won as well. That was in another Corvette. Yeah, I mean, World Challenge stuff, or the SCCA World Challenge stuff as well, which is now the SRO series, of course. Yeah, I've done very well at Road America over the years. Won quite a few races there. I love that racetrack. It's my favorite racetrack in North America.
What I like about Road America when it comes to NASCAR is that the race is so unpredictable.
Oh yeah, I'd love to do the NASCAR race at Road America. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. It seems to be such a crash fest, though.
Yeah.
It just seems to be even more than most other places, unfortunately. Yeah. I know a couple of my buddies that have done the race there, and they've been somewhat disappointed, even if they've done well. Generally speaking, what ends their race is a crash. So it's like,
and
it seems to be a bit of a crash fest. Yeah.
Yeah, and in 2011, there was a very confusing NASCAR finish where basically they used up all their green-white checkered finish attempts. And at first, it looked like Michael McDowell was going to win. Then he ran out of gas, and then Justin Allgaier took it. He ran out of gas at the white flag, and then
Oh my God!
Yeah, and then Ron Fellows took the lead, but then NASCAR penalized him for passing another competitor under caution.
Oh my goodness! Good grief!
So
that sounds like a disaster. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a very confusing finish, and it took them like 20 minutes to come up with the official results.
That can happen. That can happen, my friend. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Have you ever raced at Mosport?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've won at Mosport over the years several times as well. Love that place. One of the fastest tracks in North America. Brilliant racetrack. Love that place.
I've read on the internet that part of the reason Ron Fellows has done so good at Watkins Glen was because of his experience at Mosport. Yeah,
fast sweeping bends. Like I was saying to you about, fast sweeping bends at Sears Point. That's exactly. If you're fast at Mosport, you're going to be fast at Elkhart Lake. Ron was fast everywhere. Don't get me wrong, but I totally get that. If you learn to drive at Mosport, you are going to be comfortable driving any other racetrack that's slower corners, because that has no fear for you. And if you can control the car on fast corners, you're definitely okay on medium speed corners and slow corners. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And when you ran at Montreal in 2007, what was racing with Ron Fellows like?
You mean on the track?
Yeah, on the track.
Well, I don't know that I was ever aware of exactly who I was around at Montreal, but I worked my way up very much towards the front. But a lot of it would also be on pit stops. You know how that goes.
Yeah.
So it's not like, I was racing somebody in particular. I remember having a really good run with Tony Stewart in the 2011 race at Sears Point. And, Tony, quote unquote, has a reputation. And of course I was aware of that. And my team is saying, that's Tony. And of course I knew it was the number 14 car, right?
Yeah.
That's Tony. And I was like, he was right by the side of me. So I didn't think anything. I'm thinking, okay, it's Tony. He knows what he's doing. He's a great road racer. And we went all the way down from turn 7, side by side, through 8, through 9, through 10, to 11. He never touched me. We were an inch apart, and I was trying my best to just keep my line. He kept his line, and you know what I mean? Tony's just a racer. He's a racer. He wouldn't give up 1 inch of nothing, and I was trying my best not to give up 1 inch of anything, but he was absolutely solid. Solid, good racer. I wish I'd been able to race with him more. It was great. It was great. So sometimes you're aware of who you're around, but a lot of times, Doug, you're just not aware of who it is. You just need to, what it is, it's a car, and if it's in the way, you want to pass it.
That's the racer's feeling.
If you start thinking about who's in it, sometimes it alters the way you might drive, so you don't want to do that,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What is your favorite classic film involving motor racing between Days of Thunder, The Love Bug, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and Talladega Nights?
Probably The Love Bug, Herbie, because I was a kid and I loved that movie. That was awesome. Love that movie.
Yeah.
And then if you're talking classics, of course, Le Mans and Grand Prix, the movie Grand Prix. The others are good movies and all, but I put them, they are race movies kind of. But as a kid, I remember The Love Bug for sure.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, the Ferrari that I raced last weekend is number 53. So I christened the car Herberto because, it's 53, right? And it's a Ferrari, so we got to have an Italian Herbert, so there you go.
Yeah, I've asked this question to previous drivers before, and I may need to add Grand Prix to the list of that question. So
yeah, Grand Prix is something pretty special. If you've seen, I'm sure you've seen it.
I have.
Your history is way up there in motor racing, so it's a must. It's a must, right?
Yeah. If I had to pick one, I'd have to say Grand Prix and Days of Thunder.
Yeah. I saw Days of Thunder, but it wouldn't be in my top for sure.
Yeah. When I was in high school, I was kind of known for my Jean Girard impersonation in Talladega Nights.
Yeah, no, I know where that is. I know where you're at. Yeah, that's funny. That's great.
You want to hear it?
Go ahead, man. I'm all for it. Yeah.
My name is Jean Girard, and I am a racing car driver just like you, except I am from Formula One.
Very good. Nice.
Yeah.
I like it. Good one.
Yeah. And these are my last few questions for the chat.
Sure.
What was racing at Riverside like?
Oh, well, that was the first pro race I ever did, which was my second race ever. In my Renault Cup was my little Renault Cup car. I raced at a place called Holtville out in California on an old airfield there. And then I ended up at Riverside in the Renault Cup Series. We had 51 cars, and I qualified 18th out of 51. The series paid money, as I remember it, down to 25th. I think 25th place got $25. And I remember the back straightaway, the little Renaults were about 50 horsepower, stick shift car, 50 horsepower. And it was just an unbelievable experience running there. I remember if we ran in a draft with 5 or 6 cars together, you could see 106 miles an hour on your speedo with this little 50 horsepower car. And if you didn't run in a draft and you tried to run by yourself, you were doing about 98. So you had to run in a draft in order not to be dead last, essentially. But I loved running at Riverside. It was a great experience.
Ah, cool.
Even in such a slow car, it was great racing. Yeah, it was great racing. Because everybody had basically the same car. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and the best driver there, from what I've read, was Dan Gurney. Back in the 60s, he was almost unbeatable there.
Oh, well, that may well be true, because Dan Gurney could certainly drive. Absolutely. He was a great driver.
Yeah, and you want to hear what Tommy Kendall told me about him in Riverside when I interviewed Kendall?
No, because Tommy would know him, yeah. I think I met him like once in a paddock somewhere. I was introduced to the gentleman. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and Tommy told me not only was Dan Gurney a ringer, but it was almost not fair, because when he drove at Riverside, we were all like, we know who's winning this one.
Yeah. No, that in itself is psychologically difficult to deal with, right? That's what I was saying about you don't want to know who's next to you, because psychologically you might start thinking about it, and you're already done.
Yeah, and that's just the thing, drivers aren't there to make friends, they're there to win.
No, that's right. I mean, that's true. I mean, you've got to race fair, but
of course, yeah.
If you can, but some do, some are less so.
Yeah, some drivers are different, But I personally believe in driving fair. Yeah,
I do for sure. I think, it's just, I think a lot of it comes to personality as well.
Yeah. So what is racing at Road Atlanta like?
Great track. It's another very fast racetrack. Petit Le Mans, I've won Petit Le Mans a couple of times. I've won other races there over the years. It's one of my favorite tracks, probably one of my top 5 favorite tracks in North America for sure.
That's cool.
Fast. Turn 12 there is memorable every time you go through it. Is it flat? Is it not? Can I make it flat out? Do I have to lift? It's fantastic. It's a fantastic place.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look into that turn that you mentioned to see what the action is like.
Turn 12. It's not scary. It's just, it's all on full respect.
Ah, cool. And this is the last one I'm going to ask before we conclude it. What was your reaction to being inducted in the Corvette Racing Hall of Fame?
Humbling. Very, very humbling. Very humbling experience. I think Ron Fellows went in the year before me, and I didn't expect anything. Having come here as a little, as a computer programmer with little expectation of ever being able to race, starting racing as I did, like with that little Renault Cup car and driving it to the racetrack and sleeping in the car and doing all the other stuff. Once you move up through and you get paid to drive race cars for as many years as I've been paid to drive race cars, you're very thankful. And then when something like that happens, and it's sort of a fan appreciation, a Marks appreciation, and then it's the Corvette, the American sports car. I mean, it meant an awful lot, Doug. It really did mean an awful lot. And that's one of the reasons I'm in Bowling Green now, because of the fact that, you know, that I've had opportunities, and the Corvette has been central to my professional racing career. You know, it wasn't the start of it, but it's been part of it, from the Corvette Challenge days to the old Escort series, to Tommy Morrison's racing Corvettes, to obviously the factory race team up until the last time I drove with Ron Fellows in his last race at Motorsport, was his last Corvette race, was in 2007 in the C6R. So Ron's last race was with me in 2007. So the Hall of Fame, Corvette Hall of Fame, just a very humbling experience, wonderful experience being inducted.
That's great to hear, and there's no question you deserve it.
Thank you very much, Doug. Thank you so much, mate.
Yeah. All righty. Thank you so much. But before you go, may I ask, how would you rate our interview on a scale of 1 to 10?
A thoroughly enjoyable 10.
Awesome. That's good to hear.
All right, Doug.
All righty. But one more thing.
Care.
Yeah, one more thing.
Oh, yeah, sure.
If you'd like, I could burn the interview on a DVD for you and send it to you through the mail, the recording of our interview. Would you like that?
Yes, I would love to have a copy of that. That would be very nice of you.
All righty. I'll burn it on a DVD and I'll send it to you through the mail.
Thank you. Yeah, if you don't have my address, just tell me when you've got it done, and I'll send you an address to send it, mate.
All righty. That sounds good.
Thanks, Doug. All the best to you, lad.
All the best.
Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Bye. Cool. That turned out extremely well, and I'm very proud of it. Alrighty. Turned out well. Thanks to all who joined me, and thanks for anyone that commented. Have a good one.